Hey, in the last video I mentioned something briefly that probably sounded a bit strange if you didn't know the context. I said that I had to stop my run for the 300 million ruble ending. At that point I was level 37, sitting around 205 million rubles and about 180 raids into the run. And the plan was simple. Speedrun the story, unlock everything I needed and then grind the remaining money so I could catch up to my friends. The whole reason I reset my account in the first place was because I cleared Terminal on the first attempt, which meant that if I wanted to experience the run together with my friends, I needed to start over and go for the survivor ending instead. So the entire idea behind this run was catching back up to them as quickly as possible. And honestly, the run was going really well. Progression was smooth, I pushed through the story quickly, unlocked Lightkeeper, completed the task, and everything was moving exactly the way it should. Eventually, I reached the point in the questline where you retrieve the case connected to the Falling Skies quest. You first hand the case to Prepper earlier in the quest chain, and later you need to get it back from Lightkeeper so you can open it with a craft and continue your story. So I went through the entire process of getting Lightkeeper, made my way to the lighthouse and walked into his room, starting the dialogue to retrieve the case. And this is where things went wrong. When I tried to collect the case, Lightkeeper told me that my special slots were full, and that he couldn't give it to me unless I freed one of them. Fair enough, that's normal Tarkov behavior, so I left the room, cleared one of my special slots and walked back in. The moment I did, the game exploded into error messages. The dialogue window froze completely and Lightkeeper simply stopped reacting. I was stuck inside the dialogue interface with no way of clicking anything. No way to close the conversation and no way to move. The entire interaction was completely locked. At that point, the only thing I could do was force close the game with Alt F4. So then I restarted Tarkov, went back into Lighthouse, made my way to Lightkeeper again, this time already with a free special slot, and tried to pick up the case again. But the dialogue option was gone. The game simply behaved as if the interaction had already happened, except I never actually received the case. And that created a really strange situation where the story had technically progressed, but the item required for the next step did not exist on my account. I tried everything that would normally fix something like this. I restarted the game several times, cleared my cache, tried to trigger the interaction again, tried to progress the story further in case the game would somehow correct itself. And I did manage to progress the questline to the next stage. I went to labs, retrieved the jammer you need for the case, unlocked the craft that is required to open it and prepared everything for the next step. But there was still no case, which meant the entire storyline was effectively blocked. At that point I contacted BSG support. I sent them screenshots and a video of the bug. Initially they actually responded fairly quickly. They explained that the bug was already known and told me that the team was working on it and that I should just simply wait until it was resolved. A couple of days later, they told me that I should check my messages with Lightkeeper, because sometimes missing quest items get delivered through the in-game messaging system. I already knew it wasn't there, because I was checking my game daily. I checked again to make sure, but nothing was there. I sent them screenshots confirming that the case had not been delivered, and from that point onward the communication became difficult. I kept asking for updates, explaining the situation, telling them that this bug effectively stopped my run, and the whole reason for the run was to catch up to my friends so we could do Terminal together. But the responses became shorter, more generic, and there was never a real indication that something was actually happening behind the scenes. Days slowly turned into weeks. After about 2 weeks, I had already mentally accepted that the run was probably over. The Terminal run with my friends was planned for that weekend, and it looked increasingly likely that they would simply have to do it without me. If the bug ever got fixed, I would probably have to do the entire thing alone at some point in the future. Fortunately, something else happened during that time: the release of World of Warcraft Midnight. I convinced my friends to jump into WoW with me while we are waiting, and we ended up having so much fun with it that the entire plan for the Tarkov Terminal run basically fell apart. The weekend where we originally wanted to do it came and went, and nobody was really interested in leaving WoW to go back to Tarkov. So in a strange way, the timing worked out. But the situation itself was still extremely frustrating, because the core issue here is not that bugs exist. Anyone who has played games for a long time understands that not every edge case can be caught before release. The real problem is how a bug like this is handled once it happens. This wasn't a minor issue. This was a story progression bug that completely blocked the questline. There was literally nothing I could do to continue playing the game as intended. And a situation like that should never take over 2 weeks to resolve. And the contrast became very obvious because while all of this was happening, I ran into a similar situation in World of Warcraft. There was a bug in Midnight's story that prevented players from continuing the campaign. I noticed it, realized that there was nothing I could do to fix it myself, and simply went to bed. When I logged back in the next day, the issue was already fixed. And that is generally how progression blocking bugs should be handled in live service games. Ideally, there should be a fallback system for situations like this. If a quest item goes missing, a game master should be able to restore it manually, or at least there should be some kind of automated system that allows players to reclaim critical quest items. The game clearly knows how far you are in the story, so technically it should be possible to verify and restore them. Instead, the entire situation turned into a waiting game. And the common excuse you hear whenever this topic comes up is that BSG is a small studio, that they don't have the resources of a company like Blizzard, and that people should be more understanding because Tarkov is developed by a relatively small team. But you need to understand that BSG is not a tiny indie studio anymore. They have hundreds of employees at this point, and they are much smaller studios that handle these situations far more efficiently. A good example for me personally is Guild Wars 2. Over the years, I have had several situations in the game where items were missing, where I accidentally deleted something important, or where progression was blocked. Every single time I contacted support, the issue was resolved within 1 or 2 days. Sometimes even faster. So from that perspective, it becomes very difficult to justify waiting weeks for a progression blocking issue. Eventually, after 2.5 weeks, the case finally appeared on my account and I was able to start the craft required to open it. The moment it showed up, I immediately began the craft just to make sure everything was ready in case a terminal run was happening. But by that point, most of the momentum was gone. The run itself is technically still alive. I can still continue the grind to 300 million. But the whole situation took a lot of the motivation for me out of it, simply because something that should have been a relatively quick fix turned into weeks of waiting. And that's honestly the reason I wanted to talk about this in the video. Not to complain for the sake of complaining, but because situations like this highlight a long-standing issue with Tarkov. The game itself is incredible. The depth, the systems, the tension of raids, the progression, all of that is why so many people love Tarkov. But when something breaks at system level, and that happens quite frequently, the support infrastructure behind the game needs to be able to handle this quickly, because otherwise a single bug can derail weeks of progress, and that's exactly what happened here. Before we wrap this up, I want to talk about something briefly. Right now I'm enjoying WoW Midnight a lot more than Tarkov. I've played WoW for most of my life. I have got something like 18,000 hours in that game, and at the moment that's just where my interest is. And since this channel is still a hobby for me, I think it only makes sense that I make videos about the games I actually enjoy playing. Credit for this idea goes to a very nice commenter. He said, play what you enjoy and what makes you happy. And I think that's exactly what I'm going to do. I know some of you subscribed specifically for Tarkov PvE guides, and I completely understand if that's content you are here for. But the channel was actually never meant to be a Tarkov only channel. The original idea was simply short, clear guides about games I'm spending my time with. Tarkov just happened to be the game I was deep into when the channel started. So naturally that's what most of the content became. I have always been the guy that plays a few different games and usually in phases. This just happens to be the end of a Tarkov phase. And I don't think it's a good idea to force myself into making videos about something I currently don't enjoy. I still have a few Tarkov videos I want to make and finish up, and Tarkov isn't going anywhere. I might come back to it at some point. I still really want to make a full Zero to Hero run, basically the opposite of what this run was. But for now, I'm going to spend my time diving into WoW again, and making content around that. If you're here because you enjoy the way I break down systems and explain things, then I think you will probably enjoy that as well. And if Tarkov is the only thing you care about, that's completely fair too. Either way, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.